Good morning and welcome to Budget Model Railways and another Train Shed Tuesday. And for me, quite an important Train Shed Tuesday because I've been working on this. Those of you that follow me will have seen the videos on this. And basically, I'm finding myself in the position now that I can build the layout I've always wanted. A number of factors all coming together at the same time. So this is a project that's actually been in my head for probably 11 years. So when Doug first got me into model railways, that's always the interesting one. Everybody assumes I was a model railway enthusiast and I got Doug into model railways, but it was the other way around. I was a armoured vehicles and aircraft enthusiast. And Doug wanted a model railway when he was 9. My dad had model railways briefly when I was 4 or 5 that I had a vague memory of. So I always had, if you like, this cultural memory, family memory of, I wouldn't mind a model railway one day. So when Doug said he wanted to do model railways, I kind of got bitten by the bug big time. And quite early on, actually, we were tinkering with ideas, obviously in those days in Double O. But I drew up, if you like, a wish list for an end-to-end layout. And I wrote it down. Unfortunately, I no longer have the notebook it was in. And when I was throwing some stuff out, I realised some time ago, I threw out the notebook I'd written in. But I knew what I wanted. I wanted a real railway line that went from somewhere to somewhere. And I actually wrote a history and everything for it. You know, following what happens with lines. You have a town that's not connected to the rail connection. So the big railways don't want to. So the people of the town get together and they build a branch line. Or the businesses more appropriately. And originally it was going to be, very, very English in nature. And the idea was that it would probably go down to a port or a quay. And I knew what I wanted. It needed to have something at each end. It needed a passing loop, obviously, so that you can run round trains. I wanted a TMD. I wanted a goods yard. And I wanted a passenger station. And something in between it. And then at the other end, probably a link to a big town. The trouble is, Double O, you need an awful lot of space for what was really going to be quite a small layout. So that's kind of got buried in my head. And then obviously a few years ago, I got into N. But I've done all the other things. So I've done my Japanese layout down there, which is going to a good home at the weekend. I've done lots of shunting layouts. So this is the box layout to go on the back of the motorbike. I haven't got it lit today, but it's very effective when it's lit. And over the back, I've got a couple of other layouts. And then really a number of things came together. So I built this layout inspired by a number of very minimalist open layouts that I saw at exhibitions. And then I've kind of been held up because I was planning on building this big oval here, but I just can't make it work in my head. And I was talking to Russell at the Sompting Club that I realised that I could build the layouts the other way round so that I could use the big bench behind me as my workbench. This is my workbench. So I like standing sometimes when I work. So this was going to be a workbench. And I realised that I could turn the shed round, put one end of the end-to-end layout on here. It can run through some countryside there, about a foot deep over the desk. And in there's going to be a factory or a siding to give another reason for the line to have continued in existence. And then over there somewhere is going to be a town scene. But I haven't worked that bit out yet. But it doesn't really matter because I know I can do it. What's really got me going is that this has brought together all the ideas from a number of years. So I've got the open look down here. As those of you that have been following, this is going to be a big muddy river. A little trickle of water through the middle, mud either side, so it's tidal. Just playing around with buildings, I got the idea for this little market garden there that's rather nice. We've got a bridge coming over. I always wanted a bridge. The siding suddenly came into head because I've got the room. I had to change the two buildings round because I realised if I was storing wagons here, I couldn't run a little train down into the station. But it's the openness that N gives you. This is 1.6 metres, so about 5 feet by 44 centimetres. So about 18 inches, something like that. So it would be 10 feet by 3 feet in double O, and I'd still need the same again to build the other end. So it's what N gives you. And then what I knew is that I didn't want to fill it full of track. I want the model railway to be in the landscape. But despite that, I've still got what I want. I've got a 2-road goods yard there. I've got a passing loop. I'm really pleased with the TMD as it's coming along. So this is the old, I believe it's Fowler industrial building. My late father had an HO one, which I've still got, that came off his layout in the late 60s and has been on a few of mine. So it's quite nice to use the N-gauge version. But I've painted it. I've made a little, using the corrugated cardboard plastic sheets, I've made a little lean-to shed. I've got it's actually a Japanese office kind of workshop building. So that works really well because I've got a stores and a workshop. I've got an engine shed with a road to the other side. I've got a stores and workshop. And I wanted the idea of there being, if you like, the HQ, the offices of the railway. And I think that, I'm not sure of the positioning yet, but that will make a really nice office block. It's just the Kestrel Gauge Master station with should have a little step off the back, which I cut off, so it's a flat building. I didn't have any chimneys for it, so I put some ridge tiles on it. But this was part of the original concept. I wanted it to be a complete railway. Somewhere to work on the locos, plus, if you like, the administrative centre. And what makes all this easier is the Kato pocket line stuff. I never thought I'd get into electric locos, and in some ways I'd prefer to have done diesels. But I now am at the point where I like catenary on a layout. It adds something to the kind of freelance look. That one keeps falling over. The freelance look that I like building. So actually having masts everywhere works for me. I've had a few comments. This is not supposed to be a UK layout. It's not supposed to be anywhere. It's freelance. You know, these locos, I think that's actually a very loose copy of a Japanese loco that Kato make. The Kato trams are very generic. But I was reading a book last night on European tramways, and it's amazing how many started in the town and ended up somewhere rural, and some of them pulled freight. So it works very well. The castle was originally, I was toying with a video yesterday, going to put it right in the centre for a change. But it dominated a bit. It became the whole talking point for the layout. But now I've got a reason for the railway line to have been built, and more importantly, a reason for the railway line to still be in existence. So particularly in Japan, they have a lot of tourist lines tending to go to temples and that sort of thing. So in this case, we've got a tourist attraction. So that keeps the passenger line busy. We're going to have a little town, and that's going to have a cafe and a shop there to support the tourists. And we've got a hotel. So again, there's the reason for the town, and there's a reason for the railway line. The town's going to be, in theory, busy enough. You know, you could have quite a city coming off the back of that with the railway on the edge. The goods yard will be connected by a road that, in theory, come off here and round into the town. I'm going to build a little creek here. I'm going to chisel out a creek to explain why this isn't part of that. Why the riverside and the creek needed to be a bit longer. And I might even put the buffer to suggest that this track originally carried on further down the river. The advantage of things like trams is I don't need passing loops. So I can run a little passenger train into there, goes back out, reverses, and then into the station. I do need a passing loop for the freight, which is why it's there. But I don't need to necessarily a passing loop because the trains are all going to be double-ended trams. But it does mean I've got some very nice steam locos, Japanese steam locos, some nice coaches that I could pull a little coach train in, run around it, run it into the station. So we could have, if you like, rail tours almost. I can run some bigger locos down here if I like. We've got the head shunt there for the goods yard so that the goods trains don't have to interfere with the passenger trains. It will also mean that I can run a timetable, which is something I've wanted to do for a long while. Just write out a timetable. How would the day work? And as this is the administrative end of the line, It starts here every morning. So the locos come out the TMD, the trams are stored in the station. They go off and run to the other end and back. I could have some real fun. You'll need pick-up freights, the interchange at the other end. I can run a bigger diesel down occasionally off of the main line if I want to. I could get a couple of my larger 2-car DMUs into the station if I want to. That, incidentally, is another little building that was kicking around at my father's. I had it on another layout, and when I sold it, I kept that. And the other important thing for me for this layout is I know where everything's going to go. I stop working on layouts when I run out of ideas of what something's going to look like. I know exactly what this is going to look like, so I can just work through it. It's going to be a very long-term project. The painting and ballasting of the track alone is going to take a long while. I would like to have used Kato track, but the points I've got are very much bigger, and it would have been difficult to get everything in. I would have preferred to. I could have laid the Kato track. The track would be done. I'd be ready to go. On the plus side, I do like the way that I do ballast track. It comes out quite nice. I'm not looking forward to the fact it's going to take a very long time to clean all these points up once they've been ballasted and weathered and get them running smoothly again. It's what I've got against doing track like this. And certainly when I build the big oval behind me eventually, which is going to be about running very long trains, that will be Kato. And so that will come on much quicker. But it'll end up with a nice look with ballasted track. But the important thing is that the original concept has then gone through all the input of things I've built over the years. I've now got to the stage where I know what I want. I like N. I like Freelance N with this kind of almost European, Eastern European look. I know what kind of scenic look I'm looking for, quite minimalist. I know what elements I wanted, and then doing it in N gauge has given me the space. And even if I only get this bit built initially and I run a fiddle yard off of there for a while, this is still interesting enough that I can run it in its own right as a layout. It is on a separate board, so it means that should I need to move or anything, it can come with me. Could technically mean I could exhibit it, although it's bloody heavy. But if I could get a helpful friend, and I have a few of those from something, it could at some point be exhibited, which would be quite nice. So I'm sure if you're watching this, it's just another layout. I know I don't get as much interest on these freelance layouts. The viewing figures are much less than some of the other videos. But a big thing that I've been speaking about a lot, I thought I'd put it on the tripod, save the camera shake a little bit. A big thing I've been speaking about a lot is that model railways, you have to do what works for you. If you start, I could make videos on UK outline 00 steam and I would get 4, 5, 10 times the viewers. And I can make videos just to get viewers. But I'm kind of getting really disappointed with social media, YouTube and so on, where people are simply making things to get views and to get people to watch them. You can't sustain a long-term project if you're making what you think you should build. You know, I must build, you know, when you think all the books I've read, UK books on model railways, bar one, are always, well, decide the era and decide the location. That's bollocks. That's a way to impinge on what you do and slow you down appreciably. The late great Cyril Freezer had it right in all his books. No, put some track down, buy some trains you like and run trains until you decide what you really like. It might be that I've decided I really wanted to build the Great Western Railway and I wanted to get it absolutely right. And that's fine. But it's not the way you start doing a model railway, in my view. Unless you're very fortunate and you know enough about railways that that's what you want to do. And I think that's where that school of thought comes from. The model railway hobby, so this is a bit derailed, is dominated in the UK by the old boys who remember whatever railway they remember when they were boys. And I even read a book by Pico where the editor said, let's face it, model railways is 100% about nostalgia for our childhood. And he meant steam. And I thought, what a silly way to start a book. Because anybody, I'm 60, I don't remember steam trains. So anybody younger than 60 is not building a railway to remember their steam trains of their youth. There are people my age and younger who are making diesel outline railways to remember the railways of the 70s and the 80s, and that I kind of get as well. But if you're going to keep the hobby going, it's no good saying in a book that the hobby is purely about recreating the railways of our youth. It's not. It's about being creative. It's about enjoying running trains. If we're going to bring people in, it's got to be about what do you like. Now, if that happens to be that you want to make Goathland Station in 00, exactly right, that's fine. But it's not the only way the hobby should go. So for me, this is probably the most excited I've been about a layout that I've built, because it's bringing together all these elements from 10 or 11 years, all finally coming into one place. All finally coming into what will be a bigger layout. You know, that you're going to have a little link line about a foot wide. I'm going to do some things I've always wanted to do, like embankments and what are there, but there's going to be a little factory there to explain why the line's still going. It's always been on the list, but it won't have a passing loop. So it'll be the idea that you've got to pick the wagons up, bring them in here and bring them back down. So again, making the timetable interested. And I'm beginning to get quite interested in what are we going to make the other end look like? And I think it's probably going to be a bigger town. I like my town scenes. It's going to be more of a challenge because I know I've built several really nice Metcalfe and Super Quick based town scenes, but I kind of want to move away from that. So it's going to be a project to see, well, how do I do a town scene that's more this kind of generic European? And I've got some big buildings in Engage. I'm just looking to see if I can find my box to show you, but I can't. So I can do that. And I have got, now I've got this, bear with me while I rummage. So I've always liked this station. About the second Engage layout I ever built, which I really, a loop which I really liked, had this station. Now I happen to have a brand new kit of it with the station and the platforms and the canopies. It only cost me 20 quid. So that is really interesting me for the other end of the town. I did treat myself to this because I had one of these second hand and I put it on a layout and I sold it. So I did buy the new one, and that's one of my favourite buildings. So that could go at the other end of the town. So the idea is to, as I build this, going to be 3 modules. This one, the link and the other end. They've got to reflect what I want. Oh, just kick the tripod. It's a bit of a smoky picture, this. So I'm sorry about that. I think it's the lighting in here. So the layout's got to reflect things that I've always wanted to build. Buildings I've always wanted to build. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not going to do anything where I think, well, I ought to do that. That's the right way to do it. I've had some lovely comments on the other video, quite rightly saying where the castle should be or where the loop should really have been. But it's got to be really what works for me. And this layout, I'm really fortunate. I've not had to buy anything for this part. So I had to buy a little bit of new track to finish it because I couldn't get second hand. Although I am going to Classic Rail tomorrow to see if I can get enough to do the other end. But bulk of it is things I've already bought in the past, sat in my Will This Work box. The TMD was a real serendipity moment. This building, I saw it on the shelf and I put it on the track to replicate a building. And then suddenly thought, well, hang on, if I cut the end out and put some tall doors on it, I can run the loco in. And it's long enough. And, you know, that was kind of, wow, you know, I really wanted to use this building and I was going to have to scratch build one. And it's just right for a single steeple cab. Because the advantage of doing either diesels or electric is they're very different to steam locos. They don't need to be kept in a shed overnight. They don't need extensive ash pit, coaling and everything else. You turn a key and off you go. So it means the servicing for it is a lot easier. Most electric and diesel locos are stored in the open. That shed would actually just be for when you want to do maintenance. So it's great. It means I can store a couple of locos there. I've got a little unpowered engineered track maintenance vehicle coming. So the idea is I'm going to leave that there for visual and then I can run the other 2 in. So I don't need to worry about coaling facilities, whatever. I might put a little diesel tank in there just for when I run the diesels down. And I even had this that's never really bothered me. It's quite a nice little signal box, but actually painted up and repaired, that there is going to look right for what is a busy old junction or terminus. There's 9 points on here. That's my son just ringing me. I'll ring him back in a second. He did say he'd ring at 9 o'clock. So there we go. Lots to talk about. This is going to be the layout now I'm going to spend most of my time on. I've got to finish the box layout because I need to exhibit that next year. But this will be the main work. So it's not your thing. I guess we're going to lose some people. But if it is, stay tuned because we've got some really interesting work coming up. I'm going to end now so I can go and ring Doug. But thanks for watching.